I'd actually love to start on a topic of rejection. There's so many women who have an idea for business, but they either maybe got rejected by their partner, a family member, a boss, and they're really using that rejection as a reason to think they're not good enough to launch their business. What would you say to that person who's using the excuse of rejection to prevent them from really getting started?
I would say, don't look at rejection as a bad thing. If you're a founder, at least in this business, if you're a founder, a no is not a bad thing. I mean, as an investor, I say no a lot more than I say yes. And I have to say, as an investor, that's a really difficult thing to do. I'm always saying no. And, you just mentioned that you saw me at an event recently. And I mean, I walk into events like that and I've said no to so many of the companies I meet regularly. And I think the best thing you can do is show up the next time you see that person and just be like, hi, good to see you again. Here's what's been going on, because I might invest the next time. Sometimes I just want to get to know you. So don't look at a no as a bad thing. Look at it as a no for now, or maybe you're not talking to the right person. And also you can turn it around. So for example, if I was an investor, which I am, and I turned you down, you could turn it around and try to learn from that and say, why didn't you invest today? Like, what was your concern? And I can't tell you how often, like I do this when I'm fundraising, and I can't tell you how often the reason is, well, actually, we don't have a lot of liquidity right now, AKA we don't have the capital to invest right now. And it's like, okay, well, could have saved me some time and told me that before this meeting, but okay. But it's still good to get out there and meet investors for when they have raised and have a new fund. But I think sometimes the reason has nothing to do with you. More often than not, it has nothing to do with you. And I think in those situations where you feel like you've been rejected, one, use it to like drive you. I mean, the moments that are so difficult for me when someone said no and I worked so hard and I just felt like completely rejected, I let those drive me, like make me work harder. I've had a lot of discouraging moments recently, just being a female in finance and technology. And those moments where I feel so low, and I mean, I don't want to be a victim. Like, I want to own it, and I want to take that, and I want it to make me stronger, and it drives me to work harder. And it's like, prove them wrong. Go prove them wrong.
Exactly. And I love that because, and we'll go into your story, even though you are, and you have to say no to entrepreneurs that may be coming in front of you, like you've said, you've gone through your fair share of rejection. You were in acting and entertainment, which is like, I'm sure you got it all the time.
Oh yeah,
right?
that's totally. I mean, I was an actress. I was on a Nickelodeon show for a couple of years and then did a bunch of movies. And I mean, the no's, I think that's why no's don't bother me, because I literally got so many no's that I was like, oh, this is just a normal thing. This is like everyday part of my life. Like, people just say no. And I almost started thinking of it as like a game. Okay, I'm not talking to the right person. Okay, you said no. Okay, so I'm going to find the person. Where's the yes? We're going to find the yes. And it actually helps you be more creative about, whatever your goal is. Like, okay, well, this person said no, but there's always another solution. And yeah, don't let it get you down. I mean, as an actress, like nothing feels worse than you standing there in your little outfit. Like, this was like, pre-female empowerment, and I'd wear like whatever scantily clad thing I could wear. And they're like, no, don't talk. Turn around. No.
Oh
And I'm
my
like,
God, Jessie.
oh my God. Like, I have never felt so bad in my life. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to work harder.
Yes, and you're proving them all wrong right now. So I love that advice. So ladies, if you're listening, do not take no personally. There's so much potential. Keep going. And, I actually want to go back a little bit in your story and talk about your upbringing. You grew up in Silicon Valley as a fourth generation venture capitalist. I'm sure business and tech was always a conversation in your family dinners. How do you think it really has shaped you as the woman today in terms of how you think about business and money?
I feel very lucky that my family did talk about money to me. I can't tell you how many women in my life, friends, women I work with, women in finance. I can't tell you how many of them feel uncomfortable talking about money. It's important to start talking about money. We as women, it's a real disservice to women because for some reason it's become this taboo topic for women to talk about money. And we have been taught to give away money before we know how to grow money or make money. And why would you give away money before you make money? Like, why would you do that? That's just not logical. And I feel very lucky because my family always was talking about not money, but about how to build a business and how to think about money in terms of a business. And so, my dad, like when I was about 10 or 12, he was trying to explain how you could have ownership in a business to me. And he said, well, what are you into? And, like any girl of that time, I was into Barbie because that was like one of 5 toys that was out there. And I was like, Barbie. And he said, okay, Mattel owns Barbie. And let's go buy a share of Mattel. And he bought me a share of Mattel, which still sits on my desk to this day. And it's not doing as well as it was once, but it represents something important to me. And I think about that all the time. And that was my first conversation into like the ownership and buying a brick of a business, and I think that helped me think about building businesses. And then something else we used to always do is, we played this computer game, like when it was like, what was it? 3D ROM, like those like things.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
3D in the computer. And we only had like 2 games, but one was Gazillionaire Deluxe. I need to like go find this game, but I'm sure there's an app or something now. But it was about buying. It was about supply and demand. So you were an alien. And you had a rocket ship and you would fly to different planets and you would be able to sell and buy things on different planets that other planets needed. And you would do well when, the supply was lacking and you had something that they wanted and you'd sell it to them. Anyway, I loved it. It was great. And my brother and I would just play all day long. But my dad was like, this is great. It teaches you about supply and demand. And so we were always having these interesting business conversations. I was testing products. I was one of the first people to test AIM. I was in the first ever Skype video call. I was like at their first board meeting in Estonia. I've had these like crazy, weird experiences that are sort of very, very rare, I'm sure. Like you don't hear them every day. And I am very grateful for them because I saw how a lot of these businesses started from nothing and grew. So yes, that's been conversations in my family. My mom calls our dinners board of directors meetings. And it always is business. Right now, it's a lot of like crypto and, we're talking about kind of like what, Web3 is. And, it's kind of always fun.
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in those dinners. That sounds very entertaining to me. So it's actually interesting because, you grew up talking about money, really learning about investing, being exposed to technology. But after you graduated UCLA, it wasn't the world you went into. You actually went into the world of entertainment. So I'd love to hear, how did you think about your career in your early 20s?
It's sad because I'm telling you how we talked about business and I clearly knew about business and I grew up around these startups, but it feels sad to me because I am, I'm this 4th generation venture capitalist, which I share because everyone came from somewhere. And I think, that's a place I came from. And I had this great knowledge of how businesses were built. But because I was a female and the first female in this line, I didn't think I could go into it. They say you can be what you can see. And what I could see was my mom working incredibly hard, raising 4 children, and my dad being the business leader that he is. And then my aunt was a very successful actress in the 80s and 90s. And so when I was about 8, I was like, oh, that's what women do. That's what women do, because she'd had success, which is so rare in entertainment. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to do. So I was like hyper focused as I am in anything I do. And I was like, I went to UCLA for theater, film, and TV. My parents thought I was crazy. My dad's like, you didn't even apply to Stanford. You didn't even apply like where we went. Like, I was like, nope, UCLA has the best theater program in the country. That's where I'm going. And I just was hyper focused on that. I I then, graduated. I had some good success in acting. I worked really, really hard and met as many people in entertainment, as I possibly could. I just remember at UCLA being like, I don't know anyone in entertainment. Who do I meet? Oh, you're writing something? Like, what is this script? Like, I was just always networking my whole life, and trying to figure out how networking is just like the most important lesson. I think women don't do enough of that. And just I would meet with people and be like, I don't even know why I'm meeting with you, but I heard that you might know this entertainment person. And like, but I worked really hard, did a bunch of movies, was on this Nickelodeon show. And then I had this really degrading, I had many very degrading auditions, but I would film this Nickelodeon show I was on for 6 months out of the year in New York, in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And then I would have 6 months off and I'd come back to Los Angeles and I would audition and do cattle calls. And they never asked your name. They would often just make you turn around and videotape you or take pictures. And it just was like so wrong. And I remember I was feeling especially low at this one moment. And I was invited to one of the first Twitter conferences. And it was at the Skirball Center in Los Angeles. And I went and I was one of the only women in the room, but I was very comfortable with that because that was sort of like what I'd grown up being. And I was like, oh, these early like tweeters and Twitterers, this is interesting. Like, what are they doing? And I just wanted to be a part of that. And I think growing up, I idolized because my family had idolized entrepreneurs. And I always had this vision like they should be celebrated more. And now, it sounds like, oh, they are though, but they weren't. 10 years ago, I had the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, on my show and nobody cared. No one. Like, I mean, what, wouldn't you just kill for that today? Like that's
1,000%. Yeah.
And I had these incredible people on the show and no one cared. Like, I remember walking red carpets because of the Nickelodeon show, trying to talk about the show I was producing. And I'm like, no, but I have like the CEO of Google. And they're like, I don't care. Literally, like, that's not interesting to me. And so I think anyway, so what happened was I went to this Twitter conference and I just wanted to create something that kind of combined these two worlds. So I created the first tech talk show. It was called the Valley Girl Show. It was really silly. It was like me and Beat TV back then. There were no real like tech outlets. We were one of the first video companies to partner with like Forbes.com and Mashable and all these tech news sites. And ultimately built this, became kind of an entrepreneur in media and built this business. We acquired some technology news blogs like Lawlowag, which was the LA tech blog. We were building out this business insider type experience. But media was really broken. And the heart of this whole business was this show. And I went through this show, did 5 seasons of the show. After 2 seasons, I'd interviewed all men. And so I made an initiative to interview 50% women in tech. And because I realized I was facilitating the problem that I'd seen growing up, and that's so wrong. I needed more media exposure for these incredible female entrepreneurs. And so I call it the Batwoman signal, but I said, hey, we're looking for women. And we were just pitched like crazy. Yeah. It was this magnet. And you realized, oh my God, there's women here. And it was the early days of theSkimm and Rent the Runway and the Gilt Girls. And it was such a cool thing to see all of these women. Sometimes they were too early for the show. And I'd say, hey, maybe I can help you and get you some funding. I helped find like Paperless Post their first investors and numerous other companies, and then I started writing angel checks. I got to a moment with the show where I set it aside because as an entrepreneur who was very familiar with venture capital, which is not typically the case, I knew I could not take $1 unless I could make it back 10 times that. And media was so broken. CBS still owes us money.
Yeah.
And like we were barely breaking even on the show. And then I had, married, had my first baby and my husband, and I'm staying up 24/7, like living the sort of like early influencer lifestyle, like, trying to do everything from write, produce, be on the show, closed caption, whatever, get it to the network.
Can't even imagine. Yeah.
And I was staying up 24/7, have all these crazy stories. I was like blackmailed by my producer. He stole all my like hard drives. We couldn't get, it's just like a crazy, crazy life. And my husband's like, I hate to be Captain Obvious, but like your angel investments are going really well, because I had just sold a company that I'd made tiny, tiny investment in. I'd sold it on the secondary market for 25x. And I was like, okay, well, I guess in the back of my head, I was thinking, okay, well, I can't run a fund though. I'm a woman. Truly, like that's what I was thinking.
Yes.
And I was like, well, let me just see if I can go raise one. And so I went and I pitched, a couple hundred, 500 something people, closed 50 of them, raised $10 million for the first fund, and started, investing in female founders in consumer tech. And the first people I pitched were the people I had had on my talk show. So like Alexis Maybank is one of my investors, Todd Wagner, who is Mark Cuban's business partner on broadcast.com. Like these people I had had on my show, and they ended up being my biggest supporters.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much I want to dig into in your story there. There's a couple of themes that really jump out to me. The one thing you mentioned that you saw early in your career is it's so important that you can be what you see, right? Like you said, even though you grew up in the environment of tech, you never saw a lot of women investors and entrepreneurs. And similar to your story, I started this podcast. It's a side project for me because I still feel like I got comfortable with entrepreneurship when I started meeting incredible women on my podcast who made it seem more attainable, and they're just like us. So I think that's so important, and there's so much more opportunity for us to do. So it's interesting to see how that's impacted your life. And also, you mentioned something that I find very important is the power of networking, right? You did that so well in the entertainment industry, like you were talking about. And also, I would imagine in your talk show, right? You were hustling, trying to get people and networking. So I'd love to hear, why you think more women should network. Because I'm also a firm believer in that. And some fun stories. I know you have an interesting story about Mark Cuban and your hustle to get him, but would love for you to just chime in on networking.
Oh yeah. I mean, this is the most important lesson in my career is meet as many people as you can. And I think it came from like, I watched my dad, my mom would be like, we have 4 kids. You're going to Asia for a business conference, take a child. And I would go with him to these incredible conferences and I'd watch him just network all day long. He'd meet as many people as he could. He taught me this rule that I swear by, which is every room you go into, meet at least 3 people. And, I think women in particular walk into these rooms, pre-COVID, they're opening back up, but next time you're at a conference, but we walk in and we're like, I don't know anybody, and don't feel that way. Force yourself into the conversation and just be like, hi, I'm Jessie. I do this, like, tell me about yourself. And I guarantee if you commit to meeting 3 people, you will meet at least 10. Because all of a sudden you start kind of feeling more comfortable in the room, and it's just like force yourself into that first conversation. But yeah, from the show, I was definitely hustling. Like I remember Jessica Alba had just started Honest Company. Oh my God, I look back and I'm like, why didn't I invest in all the people I had on my show? Like it all went public this year. I am telling you, all of them. It's like everyone it was Coinbase, it was Jessica Alba from Honest, it was like Rent the Runway. I mean, crazy.
Oh,
but I digress. But I wish I invested. So, but I didn't have any money also. So it was like, I don't know, catch 22 really. Yeah, Jessica Alba, I had brought on a business partner, Jonathan Polins, and you can't do anything alone. He was absolutely incredible. But I remember he's like, okay, I got Jessica Alba's like assistant's contact or something. Or no, it was like the assistant of the communications person or something. And I was like, okay. And he's like, you have to go to coffee with her. So I go to coffee with this girl. We go to coffee with this girl like 10 times.
Really?
And finally she's like, okay, let's do it. And I have to say that was one of the more memorable gets for me because I interviewed Sheryl Sandberg and I interviewed Jessica Alba. And Jessica Alba, I had to meet in a room with, it must have been 20 people.
Wow.
Just to like get her on the show. It was a lot of people from Honest. It was a lot of people like now I'm sure she's like, now I've seen her around a little bit. She's more accessible, but yeah, I had to answer a lot of questions. And I remember I walked out of that room and I was like, this was the hardest interview I've ever had to get. Because usually it's just, it's not as hard. But that was a fun one. And the Mark Cuban, we Googled and found his email address, and I emailed him, and he would be like, he's so nice. First of all, he's the most wonderful human. I would email and he'd be like, I can't do it right now. And I'd be like, okay, next season, can't do it right now. And next season, can't do it right now. And then one day I get this email. It's like, I'm in San Francisco and I can do it tomorrow at noon at the St. Regis or whatever. And I'm like, I'm not in San Francisco, but I will get there and I will figure it out. And I don't have a camera crew and I will figure it out. And I did it. I mean, you scramble, when you get somebody good, you scramble. I had something similar happen with Ted Turner. And I remember we booked an interview with him for like an hour, and I got there and he goes, you have 5 minutes.
Oh my God, Jesse.
And I go, can I have 7? Yeah. And he's like, okay. And it was hilarious. But I had 7 minutes with Ted Turner. And then, you do what you got to do. You do have to hustle and make it happen and make it work and do your research, which you clearly do. You know this business very well.
No, what I love is, and what I appreciate is that you show up, right? I mean, in those times you get a really big guest, like, I don't know if you felt nervous at the time, it's nervousness, but excitement. And they're typically like quick turnarounds. And you're like, I just have to step up and figure this out. And sometimes you don't even know where to start. But I love that you still did it and it always works out. And that nervousness, I'm sure, doesn't go away, but you still show up, which I love. It just shows that you are courageous and you don't let that stop you, which is why your show had so much success and you continue to have success in what you're doing today. So I just love those stories because I think it's so applicable to, even if you don't have a podcast, to your business, right? If you're trying to do outreach or just networking, like, please, women, network. I think it's so important. So many things can come out of it and you just get to meet other incredible women up to stuff. So I just love those stories. One thing you mentioned when you were getting into VC, you talked about how you didn't have so much money, right? The show was breaking even. You were doing these small angel investments that were doing well. And in another interview, you've talked about how you had a bit of imposter syndrome, right? There wasn't a lot of women venture capitalists. So how did you not let that stop you, right? You had 500 meetings to get 50 yeses. I'm sure those days were tough, but what was really your motivation to push through and not let those no's hold you back at that time?
I look back and I blacked out. I don't know where this insane confidence came from that I was just going to keep going, because now I get down and I'm like, I did this when I was in my 20s. I should be able to I've accomplished something now. I shouldn't be discouraged or why am I losing confidence? But I think it was I don't know. I just had blind confidence or something. I just would keep going. I think also my dad has raised us to be like soldiers. He just was always focused on efficiency. How can I get as many meetings as possible done in one day? How can I, meet as many people as I can when I land? How can I, everything was militant. And I think that was how I operated. And I just was I just will meet as many people as I can, and someone's going to get me there, and someone's going to help me, and someone's going to support me in this way. But I don't know if that answered your question, but I think blind confidence, I also blacked out. I think I just was working around the clock, and you just keep going. I mean, just pick yourself up. I think also 80% of success is just showing up. And there are days, especially as a mom of 3, that I'm up all night and I'm speaking at something and I'm just dying of exhaustion. And I'm just show up, just show up, get there, and I think that's just an important thing. Just show up, do your best. It's never going to be perfect, and it never is. And you get somewhere though by trying new things. There's days where I just try things. I tweet out something weird or angry and I'm I wonder what's going to happen. And, I just kind of press go and I'm ah, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think the most important lesson in terms of growing my career has been just try it and don't be afraid to try it. I think women in particular, I talk a lot about how they have to have all of their ducks in a row. And it's just throw paint against a wall. It's never going to be perfect. Founders in general do this too, because they'll say founders will have to, they say, oh, well, wait till you see the next product. and I don't want to show you the website until it's the next iteration.
Mm.
And I'm like, I have literally seen like wireframes drawn in pencil on a piece of paper. Like, I've seen clay prototypes of vagina devices. Like, this is normal. Like, it's always going to have, as a good founder, you're always trying to make it better, So just show it to people, because also they'll poke holes in it and you might like waste less money because they showed you something you didn't see. So just show them whatever you have. I also am very visual, so I need to see something. So it's very helpful when people have a picture or a deck or a prototype or something that they've built out of cardboard,
Yeah. I love that. I think, especially as founders, there's no right answer. And sometimes you can sit there and analyze every situation, but trying things is the only way you're going to get feedback. And anytime I see myself thinking too much about something, I just go into try this, test it. There's no right answer. You just have to see what sticks. And I love that you do that also in your career. One thing that you mentioned, growing up in your family, seeing your dad really put himself out there, be like militant style. It really reminds me of my upbringing, actually my father as well. At a certain point in my career, because I pushed so much and I never really thought about how I was feeling, just I kept going and going. I hit burnout. And, it's something I still, as an entrepreneur, try to struggle. And I don't even have kids. So I look at someone like you and I'm thinking, how do you manage those nights that you're not sleeping and you're showing up? Like, so much of entrepreneurship is sustaining your, long-term energy and positivity. So how do you do it, Jessie, in your life, or any tips or tricks that work well for you?
I think I have hit burnout. I've hit it a couple of times. And I think what I've realized also is, while I was saying, in my 20s, I was kind of like doing this militant style, like meet as many people as I can. I mean, that went all the way through until, honestly, the last couple of years. And I'm 37. I am proud of that. And I, about 3 years ago, I was like, well, I'm actually not being productive. Like, I'm actually just meeting as many people as I can blindly, without thinking about it, without, and there is a moment of being being almost like thinking you're being so productive, but you're actually being completely ineffective, not helpful to anyone. And I think what I learned too, as I grew my business a little, is one, you can't do everything alone. It's so important. You need to hand off responsibility to a team. And it was, I started working with Ashley, who's been with me through all my funds. And she's VP. She's incredible. And she started kind of giving me sort of like trust me signs, trust me, I can handle this. Like, it's okay. I'll take it. And you can hand off things to people on your team. Don't be a micromanager. Sometimes they surprise you. That's really helped me more recently as well. We've grown our team a little more, and I'm able to actually hand off full projects and really trust people. That's helped me. But also what I do now, in terms of when I feel myself hitting burnout, and it's that exhaustion and it comes with anxiety, and it's usually when I'm having 5 cups of coffee a day.
Yes, Jessie, yes.
You have to do the complete reset. You're like, oh my God. Like I let it creep up. Like right now I'm on like 2.5 cups. So I let it creep up, and then you're like, like yes. I can't have, and then I like cut myself off from coffee for like a month. But I think it all comes together, and, you hit a wall, and the best thing you could do is stop. Cancel your entire next week of meetings. Cancel the entire thing. Sleep for a day, and then start just planning. Like, you need that space for the creativity to figure out how you are going to be productive, to figure out how you can reset and manage this better. I think it's actually productive to just cancel every meeting, cancel every call, and just say, okay, so this isn't working. Like, I am dying. Like, what can I like? And what I'll usually do is I'll sit down and go old fashioned, like make a list in my little notebook. And I will just write down every single thing in my entire life. I will write down, I used to try to be like work and personal. I'm a mom of 3. I'm a mom of 3. My nanny's doing my social media with me. Like, I mean, it's just like, there's no line. So I just write down every single thing in my entire life that is, some to do for me. And then I start saying, okay, so-and-so can take that. So-and-so can take this. What are my 3 goals right now that I want to focus on? Okay, we're planning for the next fundraise. Okay, we are trying to support this portfolio business. Okay, we're trying to get this new initiative out. And then like, how can I curate my schedule so that that is what I'm focused on, and then hand off the rest, or just cut it out. Like you realize like sometimes you're doing things that you're like, why am I doing this? It's not productive for me at all, So I think that, and then also I reschedule, it sounds messed up, but I reschedule meetings every month, every week, and every day. And I don't want to like reschedule you, I don't want to do that. But when I see my schedule just completely packed and I can't do anything and there's no space to breathe and I can't even get back to people on email, which you also need space for. And I often forget that. I will reschedule. I try to not do it like an hour before, but in the morning, sometimes like I'll in the beginning of the week be like, this is a potentially movable meeting. And if I get to Wednesday and haven't accomplished these 3 things, I'm probably going to move it. And then that morning, I'll sort of send out an email and be like, we need to reschedule this meeting. But I think you need to make sure that your schedule is productive, but productive for you, and that you can breathe, and that you are taking care of yourself. Like I don't do that. I didn't do that before I was a mom, and I don't do that as a mom. And so now like Friday afternoons, I try to like block off 4 to 6 so I can just like go on a walk or something. And the joke is sometimes I end up filling that up with like, oh, like it's a meeting, but like it's a walk meeting. So I'm sort of taking care of myself. But like, what if it's a walk meeting with a margarita after? Then it's like, then I'm like taking care of myself. But I think you just need to find those little moments. And what is it? Like last week I got my hair cut and I was like, oh my God, I haven't gotten my hair cut in like months. And this is taking care of myself. Like I felt like, oh, I don't have time to get my hair cut or whatever. But like, I actually felt pampered for a minute, and I think it's important to take those moments. Don't feel guilty about them. Like that's silly. But definitely remember to take care of yourself. And I think if you're spinning out of control, stop everything.
Yes, gosh, that really resonates with me. It's funny you mentioned the coffee thing. That was me yesterday. I feel like coffee, I just know when I need to stop. It like heightens the anxiety if I'm near that burnout mode. And yesterday I did stop around like 3 p.m. because I was like, I need a break to just step back, because when you're in that mindset, you think everything is going wrong. I'm like, how do I run this business? How do I do the podcast? It's just everything is overwhelming at that time. And I took a bath. I never take baths. Like this whole rest thing is new to me. And I felt like a completely different person. I was like, all right, I got this. So stopping is a new concept for me, but it really sounds simple, but it's game changing. Even if it's like 30 minutes, 10 minutes, just stop
I've been doing this thing where I just like walk around the block like 5 times too, where I've done the bath where you're like, that's bad. When you hit the moment you need to take a bath, like, you're out of control. You're like Googling like what relaxes people.
Yeah, literally.
Like, a bath. Okay, I have a bath. I could take a bath. But I feel like I do that with, like a walk. I'm trying to do more just kind of walks around the block. And we do so many Zooms now. I think it's also okay to be like, can we just do a call? I've met you before. It's okay. I don't have to look at your face,
Totally. Yeah, no, I love that. Well, that's super helpful advice. And I like even the concept of rescheduling your day and meetings depending on how you feel. I've actually heard that from a few people. So shifting gear a little bit, I want to talk more about your fund. Your first fund, you had such incredible success. You had 6 exits. 2 of them were acquired for over 100 million. We've had actually a few of your founders on the podcast are all lovely, like Heidi Zach and most recently, Natalie Gordon, founder of Babylist. I know you guys just invested in, these women are killing it. And, despite all the success that you've had in these funds, I'm curious, you've mentioned COVID, actually, despite all the hardships you've had with the first fund, was even more difficult. I believe you were also pregnant, fundraising your second fund during COVID. So What was that experience like? And, how did you again push through those very difficult times, if you remember?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when you talk about burnout, like I think of a couple moments in my 20s, and then I think about a couple moments during COVID where I was finishing raising our second fund. And I was pregnant, and this was one of those militant moments in my life where I was taking 10 to 12 meetings a day on Zoom.
Wow.
I was fried. My husband would look at me and be like, how do you do that? Like, it was the first time, COVID really like opened our significant other's eyes to like our actual life. He's like, you actually have meetings all day. I'm like, yeah, no. And I'd feel like chained to my desk, and, like I'd pee and then I'd be like 5 minutes late to things. And it was brutal just because of you're staring at people on Zoom and just trying to like keep it going. I mean, I think for me, I just was like, I just have to finish this fund. I have to close this fund. I actually took a moment because I didn't know what was happening. I needed to kind of shift and worry about my portfolio for a minute in the beginning of COVID. So we started paying more attention to our portfolio. We'd raised some of the fund, but I didn't think I'd be able to close people on Zoom. I don't know what I was thinking, but I just didn't think that, if they're writing me $1 million checks, I thought they'd feel like they had to meet me or whatever. And people were feeling really uncomfortable at that time seeing people. And so I took a couple of weeks off and focused on my portfolio and supporting them. And then I kind of got back on the like proverbial road and just was like, I'm going to see if I can close people on Zoom. And I remember being like, people are writing me $1 million checks and I've never met them. This is the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah.
But it was hard. And then I just got through it. I mean, I was exhausted, and I was more exhausted from like the Zoom burnout than anything else. And then I was pregnant, but my kids were sort of like a little more functional. So they kind of like could take care of themselves. They were around me. I felt like a lot more. Now I can kind of like, now they're back in school, which is awesome. It's like my freedom. Yeah, so I don't know. I think you just take one step in front of the next and just keep going. But I wish I hadn't stopped fundraising at that moment. I think back, you're always sort of like so hard on yourself. And I think back and I'm like, I bet it would have been a bigger fund. I bet it would have, but like, I think I needed to take that time.
Yeah. No, that's interesting to hear. I haven't heard you mention that. So that's really interesting. And, shifting gears a little bit, I'm sure you get this question a lot, but I think it's a really important one. You see thousands and thousands of pitches. What do you think are 3 mistakes that women are making when it comes to raising money for their business?
One, confidence. You need to be super confident, but don't let that get confused with not being open, because you need to be confident, but not like, I know what's best. You don't know. Like, I get a lot of that sometimes where I'm like, that's not confidence. That's actually like blind confidence. Like, I'm telling you, this is not how it works. Like, I have a business like this, I'm just trying to give you a piece of advice. But I'd say be confident, because so many of these women come in and they'll pitch me the exact same business that a male CEO pitched me, with an enormous valuation, no product, and like 0 revenue. And they'll come in and pitch me the same thing at half the valuation with 4 million of revenue, and they've bootstrapped to the whole thing. And they'll be like, I'm so sorry, we're only doing 4 million of revenue. And I'll be like, okay, so that's really good. Like, this is a beautiful company. So why are you apologizing? I just had this guy come pitch me the same thing, and he doesn't have any revenue or a product, and that's something to just be aware of. We're so hard on ourselves. Like, be confident. Also, your business better than anybody else. You've built it to this point. So be confident in what you're building. Don't apologize in the room. Like, I think there's a lot of like, I know that this looks bad because of this. I'm like, actually, I wasn't thinking that at all, but now I am. So, like, I think women often want to tell you everything about it. Simplify your pitch. Be like, here's where we're at. Here's where we're going. Here's what we need. Don't feel like this is how we got here. I have to tell you the entire convoluted story about how we got here. And, it didn't go well when we did this, and it didn't go well when we did this. You can say, we've learned a lot of lessons, and here's where we are, and here's where we're going, and here's what we need. And I think you just keep it in that format. So confidence, and just simplify. And then what's the other thing I think? Women in particular, like make sure you're building $1 billion business. Like sometimes they come and they say, yeah, no, it's a $50 million market. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. We don't invest in those. Like we can't invest in those because I need you to sell it for like $1 billion so I can make all of my investors' money back many times over. So you need to go figure out how to make that a bigger market, and multiply that by 10, that by 100, and then come back to me. I hope that math adds up.
Yeah, no, it does.
But come back to me when it's $1 billion opportunity. And sometimes they're not even seeing the $1 billion opportunities. Make sure you're seeing your product and then all the things you could build around it. And what are those? And how can you create more products? And what else will your customers want to buy from you? And I think you need to see the whole picture. Don't just see what's right in front of you. So I'd say confidence, simplify, and then just make sure you're seeing the big picture and building $1 billion business.
Got all great qualities or characteristics, mistakes that you mentioned. And, another question that I have for you, you've mastered the art of investing in founders, even when you were on the Valley Girls show, right? You were investing in Sugarfina. Paperless Post was a company that came across your deck. But what do you really look for in terms of the right founders? What characteristics or traits do you see that they embody now that you are, on your second fund and have had incredible success?
We think about this a lot because we're like, okay, what personality type are they what's worked for us? And it's the heads down founder, doesn't have anything to prove, doesn't need to be the star, just like loves the work. And they're usually terrible communicators. They're usually the ones that I'm like, what the hell's going on? I haven't heard from you in 6 months. Like, what? You haven't told me anything. And then they're like Talia from This Is Elle is like, oh, we're doing 50 million, we're projecting 50 million this year. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not going to bother you. You call me if you need me. It sounds like you're doing great, and then she goes and sells her company. And I think those are the founders. Her, Esther from Squad, who sold it to Twitter this year or last year, was definitely like heads down, building, was sort of like, yeah, we have like over 1 million users. I'm like, what happened? Yeah, we're partnering with Snapchat. Like all these good things are happening. And I think she was always about the work, was always just like, this is working, this is not working. So we shut it down. Just wanted to solve the problem. And the coolest thing about Esther was like, she did, like when they pitched me, she wasn't building a social media app. She's one of those founders who just figured it out, even if the bank account was empty. She was building I talked to her about this recently, an audio technology that could potentially plug into Alexa. And it was like this huge idea. And that wasn't working. Whatever she was doing with that wasn't working. She shifted to another platform, called it Molly. Then they turned it into a company called Squad App, and that worked. So, you want the founders that are open to pivoting, that they shut it down really quick if it's not working. But I'd say it's like they're heads down about the work, don't want to be the star, listen to their users, want to problem solve. I see Lauren Schulte from Flex is like that. She's really just so focused on the product, and she's the first one to call me and be like, did any of your other companies say that the Facebook algorithm changed? We noticed that it changed. I feel like it's not selling as well on Facebook because the algorithm changed. Is that what you're hearing? I'm like, well, that happened literally yesterday and I didn't even know about it till you called me. So now I'll go check with everyone. But she is so focused on every dollar of digital marketing spend and just the details, and wants to problem solve. So we're looking for the heads down founders who have nothing to prove and like want to build $1 billion business.
Yeah. And, just talking about Natalie Gordon, because she was just on last week, the founder of Babylist. I mean, almost like $250 million business. I'm like, Natalie, do you understand how impressive that is? And she's so humble, like what she's built is amazing. So it just reminded me of her when you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's the greatest story because we invested late in that. We don't typically come in that late, but someone sent me this deal and I'm like, she's only raised 10 million and she's doing 250 million. And then I felt like I had to get on the phone with her just to be like, is this a joke? I've never seen a company like this before. And also, I've never heard of you. So how is this possible? And she was like, yeah, no. And then, I mean, I think I tweeted something like, this was the best financials I've ever seen. It was like someone brought me a Christmas gift early because it was so clean. And, you just sort of like hold on for dear life, hoping that it's not too good to be true. Like she was so heads down, profitable, like so focused on profitability and EBITDA and all the right things. And yeah, I think those are the best founders, the ones, and that actually is what jumped out to me as I was sort of like you click, 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 click in my head, like, oh, they all, like, she was heads down. She worked hard. She hit all the markers and built a beautiful business.
Yes, and before she started Babylist, she actually started another company that quote unquote failed. So there's so many learnings that came from that she, we talked about on my podcast that set her up to really think about, distribution, monetization from a very early stage, which Babylist is, doing so well in. So I love that you're also involved with her. She's great. And, another question I have for you, in those companies that you have invested in that may not have seen, may not have been that successful, what do you think were some of the red flags in those companies?
This isn't talked about enough. Like, you have to lose a lot of money to make money in VC. And I think people need to understand that you can't go out, raise a fund and invest in like 5 deals. You, like, as an early stage investor, I have to go out. We do 20 to 30 deals per portfolio because it's a gamble. It's like gambling. I also want to encourage more women to get into it. It's not brain surgery. It's like we're picking winners. We're trying to pick the winners, and you see patterns, and I think it's really important. But you start to see some patterns, and you realize that the moment things start going down, like I see it now, I can identify it quicker. So we do this thing 2 years in, and we say, are they going somewhere or are they not? And they basically have 2 years to prove us post investment. And that determines if we will put more money in or not. And so I think at the 2-year mark, you can tell the patterns. Like, they said they were going to do this, they didn't. They said they were going to do this, they didn't. And I think those, like, make sure you deliver. You want to be conservative in your projections and over deliver. You want to do exactly what you said you were going to do. And if it didn't work, you shut it down really quick and you try something new. You want to be dependable. And I think we've seen everything. Like, some funny stories are like, boyfriend and girlfriends are literally the worst founders of all time. People ask me they're like, so people are afraid to invest in us because I'm a solo founder. And I'm like, I actually have had the worst things happen with co-founders. And it's because someone always falls off. There's always like a lawsuit. It's like always a disaster. And that'll take a company down. I actually love solo founders because I know who's in charge. And I know that they're going to take it all the way, and they'll build a great team under them who they can lean on. But like, there's no issue with who's in control or who's doing what. And, I think with boyfriends and girlfriends in particular, we just invested in one couple, and it's important to find these things out before. And this is my talk. I say, okay, I'm glad you're in love. You're probably going to get married and have babies. It's so wonderful. Let's negotiate the divorce today. Today, we're going to negotiate how you're going to break up, what's going to happen to you, what's going to happen to the company. We're going to make it so that there is zero litigation that is going to take place when you break up, just in case, for everyone's sake, because it happens so often. And it's almost better to like invest in a married couple because they're already like in it. But boyfriend, girlfriend, you still have that like power dynamic, and you're like, I could leave you at any time. And it's like, actually, you're kind of married because you have a business together. So that's been kind of interesting and has taken down more than one of my businesses. And then, co-CEOs doesn't work. You need to know who's in control there. And then just sometimes people just surprise you, and you really get to know people when you go through a tough time. And some of my founders have proved to me over and over again as they go through tough times, whether it's COVID or before that, who they are as humans, and some turn into terrible people. And you just have to I have them, then they always want to blame someone, and then they blame you, and then they blame, we've had yeah, all sorts of crazy things. But now we are much more aware of who we're investing in, and we have really interesting, diligence checks, and people are like, why are you asking that? I'm like, oh, no reason. Like, we just had a criminal at one of our companies. So.
Okay.
But I think there's, it's never going to be perfect all the time. You're investing in 2 to 3 people in a room sometimes with an idea who say they're going to do something, and you can do as much diligence as you want, but it's not a perfect science.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. No, and I'm sure, now being on your second fund, there's so many more patterns, like you mentioned, so you can kind of filter a little bit better now. But it's always so interesting to hear stories like that. And Jesse, I want to close on one topic, although I'm sure we could talk about this for just even another podcast. But you've mentioned earlier in the interview that, women have been taught to give away money versus invest and grow it. What advice do you have for women listening who want to feel more empowered and confident when it comes to money, or even talking about money, because it is still a taboo subject?
Yeah, you know how everyone plays a role in their friend group? I'm the friend who, with my college friends, with my girlfriends from high school, whatever it is, I'm like, so you're investing in the stock market, right? Or what are you guys doing? And I did this a couple of years ago, and I sucked the life out of a dinner because they all just clammed up and were like, and I realized the problem is they think they have to know all the answers about everything. Women think we think we have to know everything before we can invest. And you don't. You will learn so much more if you buy some Bitcoin and figure out what it is. And, if you invest in an early stage company and figure out how they build it and what creates a successful sort of formula for that. And, if you go to Starbucks every day and you buy some Starbucks stock because you think that that's never going to go away because people always drink coffee, like you and I, who drink 5 cups a day and then go
crazy.
But I think I would say put your money to work, play with it. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers. If you are in a marriage, make sure that your significant other is bringing you to every single financial meeting. 50% of that is yours. I just met this girl at that event we were at. I met this girl, and she had just sold a company. And I said, oh my God, that's incredible. What are you doing with the money? And that's me. I ask about the money. It's a problem, I know. But I go, what are you going to do with it? And she goes, oh, I gave it to my husband. He does that. And I was like, does what? She's like, well, he manages money. And I'm like, you just made millions of dollars. Why would you give it to your husband? You should decide together what to do, and you should be involved in that. She's like, well, I don't know. It's just kind of over my head. I'm like, how is it? It's money. How is it over your head? What do you want to do with it? You could do anything with it. You can invest in all sorts of things. And that is crazy to me. Someone who's just created wealth for their family, and she's handing it to her husband. And I think that's wrong. If make sure you and your significant other talk about everything. I mean, my husband, I'll be like, why'd you buy Netflix? You didn't talk to me about Netflix. We didn't talk about Netflix. And now we kind of know what we're comfortable with each other doing. But in the beginning, I was like, no, we need to talk about all of these decisions together. And the more exposure you have, the more you will learn. I'm not saying I know everything about how to invest or what the right investments are, but I'm willing to take that risk and to try investing in different things. I think the simplest way for women to start is get a Coinbase account for crypto and get a Coinbase or Gemini. I'd say those are who I would trust right now. And then get a Robinhood or an Acorns account to start kind of playing around with, the stock market. There's different ways to do it. You could do a robo advisor. You can pick your stocks. But I love Robinhood because I can just kind of buy whatever when I feel like it. And I think just those are two simple ways. The world makes it so easy to put your money to work now, whether it's $100 or, 10,000. And so I'd say just go do it yourself and try. I think we don't have to have all the answers. So put your money to work.
Yes, and there's 2 things that stand out. You know, when I used to be in finance and, like, the first bonus I got, I just invested it because that's what, like, people told me to do. And now, you know, fast forward 10 years, that was my seed money for the business that I'm launching. Like, who would ever thought? And I didn't know what I was doing in my early 20s. And the other thing that stands out, which is a theme that I see a lot on my podcast, is in married relationships. You know, a lot of the women that have joined us have said, I initially never really talked about money with my husband. Like, even though I was doing just as good as him or well, and actually sometimes even better, he was managing the money. And it wasn't until they got divorced that they look back, they're like, he wasn't even managing it properly. Like, what was I thinking? So I think that is so important for women and men to just talk about their unified financials and not always trust someone. You know, they might be doing the best they can, but you should just have some level of awareness of what's going on. And you don't need to know every specific detail, but it's also your money. So I love that you mentioned that, because I think there's so much work that we could do there, and just create more awareness on the importance of having those conversations in a marriage. So
I love that you invested 10 years ago and that was the seed money, because I get this question a lot, which I find sort of funny, but women will be like, okay, so I invested in the stock market and then what do I do with it? Like, how do I get it out? And that's always the question. How do I get it out? I'm like, well, when you need it, you take it out. Like, it's just growing instead of sitting there. So I think that's something to understand too. You invest it, you leave it there, you let it grow, you try different things with it. But if you're buying a house or you're starting a business, like, you can take it out. You don't have to leave it there.
total. And you know, that's interesting you brought that up, because I didn't even think about using that as my seed money. I just kind of was thinking like, okay, where can I get the money from? You know, and I was like, oh, I have the investment account. I could sell the shares. It's not a 401k. So it took me, you know, some thinking to realize that, which is so interesting. I never thought about it until you brought it up. But yes, the power of investing, even when if you don't know what you're doing, it still will grow. If you just put in the S&P 500 for 10 years, like
Perfect. That's a good safe bet.
Yes. Well, Jessie, thank you so much for joining us today. I could talk to you for much longer, but this was so much fun. Thank you.
This was so fun. Thanks for having me.